Tonight on KQED Newsroom, widespread outrage over the Sacramento police shooting of Stephon Clark is sparking nationwide protests and calls for police reform. Also, President Trump takes on Amazon as Tesla and Facebook continue to stumble. Plus, a sneak preview of the San Francisco Film Festival, featuring films that take you from Oakland streets to the Supreme Court. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. We begin with the controversial police shooting in Sacramento. We want to warn you, the footage you're about to see contains graphic content that may be disturbing to watch. Last week, police officers shot and killed Stephon Clark, an unarmed 22-year-old African-American man in Sacramento. The officers were responding to calls about car break-ins when they confronted Clark at his grandmother's home. They opened fire, shooting at him 20 times, saying they thought he had a gun. It turned out Clark was holding a cell phone. This week, State Attorney General Xavier Becerra said his office would investigate the incident at the request of the Sacramento Police Department. Meanwhile, protests have erupted across Sacramento. On Tuesday, Stephon Clark's brother and Black Lives Matter activists angrily confronted Mayor Darrell Steinberg at a city council meeting.
Stephon, y'all hear me? He's the mayor. Now the mayor wants to talk to me. The chief of police got my brother killed. He doesn't care. He shows no emotion at all. And y'all get mad at me for not crying on the news.
Yesterday, mourners attended the funeral for Stephon Clark held in Sacramento. The Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy at the request of Clark's family.
The president's press secretary said this is a local matter. No, this is not a local matter. They've been killing young black men all over the country. And we are here to say that we're going to stand with Stephon Clark and the leaders of his family. We are putting aside our differences. It's time for preachers to come out the pulpit. It's time for politicians to come out the office. It's time for us to go down and stop this madness.
To discuss all of this further, I'm now joined by KQED politics and government reporter Katie Orr, who joins us via Skype from Sacramento. Also, UC Berkeley public policy professor Jack Glaser and Oakland-based civil rights attorney John Burris. Welcome to you all. Thank you for being here. Katie, I want to begin with you. The family had requested an independent autopsy. Those results were released today. What did that autopsy find?
Yes, their independent autopsy found that Stephon Clark was shot 8 times. 5 of those times he was shot in the back. He was shot once in the side and once in the neck and then once in the thigh.
So what do those findings, Katie, suggest about the police officer's narrative about what happened that night?
Well, the attorneys for Clark's family say that that suggests that the police officer's narrative is not right. We have been told they feared for his life, that he was approaching them. They thought he had a weapon. But this report would indicate that he was largely standing with his back turned away from them. The doctor said that the first shot actually went into his side while he was facing the house, and it was so powerful it actually spun him around so his back was fully to the officers, where he proceeded to be shot in the back. And as he was either falling to the ground or on the ground, he was shot in the leg.
So, John Burris, I want to bring you in at this point because you were involved in drafting a Sacramento City Council mandate that was used in recent years to help revise the police department's policies on use of force. Based on what you know, do you think that proper procedure was followed in the Clark shooting?
No, I do not. Given my assessment of the facts, the big issue here, it seems to me, is you're not supposed to use force unless your life is in danger. Now, if you perceive that, the question, was that reasonable or not? My concern here is that these officers appeared to leave a position of safety. And as the young man walked toward them, they seemed not to assess properly whether he was a threat to them or not. So the real question is, did they really have exercise proper judgment here? You can have all the procedures you want. We can do a good job, and I think Sacramento has largely tried to do a good job in revising their policies, but the officers have to follow them. And if you don't follow them, what you get is a violation of those particular policies, but you'll get what you got here, number of shots. To me, the failure to properly assess best, this young man who's back to them after 1 or 2 shots clearly is in violation of the rules in terms of how you use excessive force. You should never use force to the point where it's unreasonable under the circumstance, and that appears to be done here.
And Professor Jack Glaser, weren't there other rules that weren't followed as well? I mean, did they identify themselves as police officers? Did they get immediate help for Stephon Clark?
As far as I understand, they didn't identify themselves, which they are supposed to do, and it does seem like they spent quite a bit of time waiting before getting help for him. And the latest report I saw was that it took 3 to 8 minutes for him to expire after he had been shot. So that's going to be an issue. But I'm not a forensic psychologist, and I'm not really prepared to comment on the particular case, but I can say that this is the kind of thing we see, and I'd agree with Reverend Sharpton. This is not a local problem.
You know, also one of the issues was when the other officers came up on the scene, an officer says to mute their mics. That is quite disturbing because generally a person will tell the truth about something immediately after it occurs. But if you tell them to mute their mics, then you seem to be suggesting that you don't want to hear them tell the truth about what happened at the beginning. Now, granted, police officers have rights, but that's quite disturbing to me. I don't know that an officer can justify shooting this person that number of times in the back, given that he never saw a gun. They were never told that he had any kind of weapon that could be dangerous to them. At best, they were told that earlier that a person, and not even certain if it was that person, might have been breaking into windows, but there was no corroborating evidence that he in fact was doing that or that he had any type of serious weapon.
This issue has, of course, drawn a lot of national attention. There are now protests nationwide. And when Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the White House was asked about this, her stand on it was that the president very much feels like this is a local issue. You said earlier it is not a local issue. In what way?
Well, certainly there are local aspects to it, and Sacramento and the local law enforcement officials and criminal justice officials are going to have to adjudicate it at the local level. But it's clearly a national phenomenon. It's not necessarily the case that it's a worsening national phenomenon, but we are now becoming conscious of this problem of unnecessary fatalities at the hands of police officers, largely because of the availability of video evidence, either by bystanders or body-worn cameras. This is a national problem in the sense that roughly 1,000 people are fatally shot by police every year. I'm not going to say whether that's the right or wrong number, whether that's too high or too low, but it's very clear that there are racial disparities, particularly among those who are unarmed.
You know, I was going to say I have at least 3 shootings that I'm looking at right now where an African-American male has been shot in the back in different cities. And not excluding Sacramento. I had a case in Sacramento a couple of years ago. So it does happen. I don't see this as an isolated event. I see it as a mindset that officers have in these areas. We talk a lot about implicit bias, racial bias, that is ingrained within a person's mental state, too quick to shoot. That's what I see in this case, that it was just too quick. I mean, you didn't have to do it. You were in a position of safety. And what officers are taught is how to de-escalate a situation. Advise who you are, let them know who you are. You have time, distance, and space to take advantage of. They were in a position. So that's why it's different. And plus, when the person turns his back, did you not see it? Did you not see it? Those are the questions that we have to deal with.
And those are the questions the community in Sacramento is asking. And Katie, I know you've been following this story all along, and the Sacramento Police Department is now investigating. The state attorney general's office is overseeing that probe. Is there any sense that gives Sacramento residents any more confidence in the investigation? What is the mood in the city like right now?
Well, I've heard mixed things. Some people say they are confident that this can be a turning point for the city. There's a lot of hope because the police chief is relatively new. He's been in his job for 7 months, but he is African American. He grew up in Sacramento. The point was made that he had a job in a relatively affluent suburb north of here, Roseville, and he came back to Sacramento. So there are people who see that as a good sign. Also, he voluntarily asked the Attorney General to oversee the investigation. But I did speak to some women who knew Stephon Clark's grandmother. They've known her for 40 years, and they said, why would things change now? They recalled an experience they had 30 years ago when an African-American man was walking through a field and he was shot by police. So they did not hold out much hope. So I think it is, depending on who you talk to, there are both sides being represented. But the community has been very active, as you mentioned, coming out with protests and really pushing for some substantive changes to the police force in Sacramento so that this doesn't happen again.
You know, I have worked with the Sacramento Police Department of trying to bring about change. I've had a couple cases. I will tell you that the police chief, as well as members of his staff and the mayor's office, are equally interested in bringing about social reform to the department and the community. So this presents an opportunity for not only the community and the police to kind of work together. You do need someone on the community side who understands what policing is about, so that they can effectively put forth ideas that the police department can appreciate, and therefore you can reach an accord. Now, I've done that with them. I know they're available to do it, but you do have to work at it, and you have to have people who are willing to take the time to work through those issues.
Well, you know, one of the ideas that has taken off across the country, Professor Glaser, is this idea of implicit bias training and workshops. Does it work?
As far as we can tell, there's no evidence that implicit bias training has any effect on police officer performance or across other industries as well. I think implicit bias is real, and I do think it plays a causal role in these problems. I think very likely in this case, the misperception of the object in his hand was due to an implicit association between race and weapons, which has been very well demonstrated in careful research. But what we can do about it is an entirely different question.
What can we do about it?
Well, I think the training has to be focused on preventing these situations from arising in the first place. So just as John was saying, there are ways to de-escalate. You take time and distance and cover, and so that officers are not getting into a foot pursuit kind of situation that's likely to lead to deadly force or non-deadly force. There's a broader problem than deadly force. There's non-deadly force that is also racially disparate and is probably at levels that are not necessary. And then there are even more seemingly mundane but nevertheless harmful things like just stop and search and frisk and arrests for minor offenses. So this is a broader problem.
I will tell you the vast majority of the policing that needs to work is the day in, day out conduct, because that's where people are stopped, that's where cars are searched, there are people being treated disrespectfully. And you can make a difference there in terms of just the everyday communications and stopping. I don't know that implicit bias training helps on the shoot, don't shoot situation, because that's a mental state that the officer gets into, their perception of what the danger is. The problem is, do they misperceive that in such ways that they're more racially biased in terms of their outlook than otherwise. But a lot of work can be done. I don't think it's something that we should throw our hands up and say it cannot be looked at.
There's plenty that can be done.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that we will be hearing much more. The family is now filing a federal lawsuit as well. But I want to thank you all for your time. Professor Jack Glaser with UC Berkeley, Civil Rights Attorney John Burris, and also our own correspondent in Sacramento, Katie Orr. Thank you all. Turning now to tech. Yesterday, President Trump attacked Amazon in a tweet saying the company doesn't pay enough taxes and is harming the U.S. economy. This comes amid a rough week for the tech sector. Facebook faces continuing fallout over data privacy, and Tesla issued a major recall. Joining me now with more is MarketWatch tech editor and San Francisco bureau chief Jeremy Owens. Jeremy, nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me, Twee.
All right, let's begin with Amazon. President Trump's complaints about Amazon, essentially saying that it pays little or no taxes to state and local governments and has hurt the economy. Is that true?
Not really. When we looked at the S&P 500 effective tax rates in advance of the new tax law, we found that Amazon was top 10 in the S&P 500 for the previous 5 quarters. They had an effective tax rate of more than 40%. When we go back even further, we now have a calculator online where you can look at any S&P 500 company's effective tax rate over the last 11 quarters. Amazon's at about 31%, which is higher than the average for both its sector and for the S&P 500 overall. Not much. The average for the S&P 500 is about 30%.
And Amazon is collecting taxes, you know, in the 45 states that have sales taxes.
Exactly. They started doing that. Now, the real question there is third-party sellers on the Amazon platform. Are they collecting enough sales tax from what they're doing? And is that on them, or is that on the small businesses that are selling on Amazon's platform? And Amazon has said, you know, we'd like a federal law that would make this the same across all states, and that would make it easier to deal with this problem. But that law hasn't been passed. In fact, the law that passed cut tax rates for corporations.
So why do you think Amazon is caught in the president's crosshairs right now?
Well, you'd have to ask him that. I mean, obviously, the CEO of Amazon owns the Washington Post, which
Jeff Bezos.
Yes, yeah. Which Trump has not had a great relationship with since he's become president. Yeah. So that's a possibility. But it's also they're in the crosshairs. They're very popular right now. A lot of people are talking about Amazon. So it could just be him calling out a popular figure so that he can get more publicity and look at that instead of anything else that's going on.
Any chance that he's trying to protect his friends who have businesses who feel like they're hurt by Amazon? That's certainly what some analysts have put out there.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you know, trying to figure out what Trump is doing is always, you know, an exercise in futility. But yeah, it seems like there are a lot of potential reasons for him. But the reasons he actually stated, which was they're hurting the post office and they're not paying taxes, don't seem to really be that true.
All right, let's move on to Tesla, because also this week Tesla recalled more than 100,000 Model S sedans made before April 2016. And this is because it needs to replace bolts that hold a power steering motor in place. Those bolts can become corroded, they can break. What are some of the other troubles that the company is facing?
Well, it's been a really rough week for Tesla, to say the least. There were emails that leaked showing that they were really doing everything they could to ramp up production to meet production rates that they promised to do this quarter, and they're already way behind on what they had promised to do previously. They had to pull down those.
Is this for the mass market Model 3?
That's for the Model 3,
right.
Yes, and they're pulling people off of the Model S and Model X lines to come over and try to produce more Model 3s by the end of the quarter. They had a ruling go against it in their shareholder lawsuit about Solar City. They had this wreck over on 101 with a Model X that they're investigating and looking to see if autopilot was engaged. So it's just a lot of stuff happening for Tesla, which was capped off by this recall, which just brings more of their production into focus yet again.
And Moody's also downgraded its credit rating, concerns that Tesla is burning through cash. That is now leading to some questions about, will the company have enough money to stay in operation through the end of the year? What's the likelihood of it not having enough money?
Well, if it doesn't have enough money, Elon can just go ask for more money. He's proven that time and time again. He has gone to shareholders, he has sold bonds. But yeah, the credit rating downgrade is really focused on Tesla's bonds, which have not been trading well. And with Tesla acquiring Solar City was heavily in debt. Yeah. So their debt load is already very, very large. So it will be interesting to see if he will have to, especially as he continues to ramp up production. But that's kind of where ramping up the production, if he can get these Model 3s out and get some more money in, then that will help balance a little bit.
Okay, got to talk about Facebook. Still in the headlines this week. The company announced this week that it's going to roll out features to give users more control over how their information is shared. Will this be enough to appease the anger and the anxiety among users and even regulators?
Well, it depends on what users you're talking about. I mean, Facebook has done this before when it's had privacy issues. Oh, we have a new dashboard, right? This is much easier for everybody to see what they're doing on Facebook and who has access and what their privacy settings are. And this is, you know, just another new product, right? And so we'll have to see if that actually does, if it makes users feel better to see that. And I'm sure Facebook is going to push it really hard to get people to go in there and look at and see who has access to their data, what their privacy settings are.
Enough to get lawmakers to draw back from making Zuckerberg testify?
Oh, no, not in the least. And Facebook did indicate that Zuckerberg would testify in front of Congress, but they are just nibbling around the edges at all of their data privacy things. They got rid of third-party data that they were giving to advertisers and a lot of other things.
Okay, much to keep track of. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy Owens with Market Watch.
Thank you, Twee.
Next week marks the start of the SFFILM Festival, now in its 61st year. The festival promises a powerful lineup of films and documentaries about art, life, and culture from around the world and the Bay Area. This year's centerpiece work comes from Boots Riley, an Oakland native who studied film at San Francisco State University. Riley's directorial debut, Sorry to Bother You, takes on race, humor, and telemarketing.
I just really need a job. 40 on 2.
This is telemarketing. Stick to the script.
Hey, hello. Mr. Davison, cash is green here. Sorry to bother.
Let me give you a tip. You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
My white voice?
I'm not talking about Will Smith's wife, like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer. This is Langston from Regal View.
And joining me now are the executive director of SFFILM, Noah Cowan, and Bay Area musician and filmmaker Boots Riley. Great to have you both here. I love that greeting. Well, the main character in the movie is an African-American telemarketer who skyrockets to success after he uses his white voice, as we just saw in that clip. How would you define this movie?
It's an absurdist, dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction inspired by the world of telemarketing. It's called Sorry to Bother You. So.
And you were a telemarketer at one point, right?
Yeah, a couple different points.
And what was that like? How much of that experience is in this movie?
I think that's the jumping off point for a lot of ideas. And it's not a autobiographical movie at all, but you know, you use experiences from your life.
Yeah. And Noah, why did you choose Sorry to Bother You as the centerpiece film for the festival?
Well, there's lots of reasons, but this guy sitting to my right is the main one. I think Boots Riley has been this incredibly important force in the culture of the Bay Area, and this film really encapsulates, I think, not just what's kind of incredible about this region, and particularly the city of Oakland, but how it's developed and how we can actually talk about that in terms that are new and fresh and really expressive. This film was actually part of our film house and film granting programs at SFFILM, and we couldn't be more proud that something like Sorry to Bother You has come out of these programs. It really does speak to the vibrancy and the precision of what we're trying to do here in making movies in the Bay Area.
Yeah, Film House, San Francisco Film Society really, SFFILM, really made it possible to do this because, one, they not only gave the project money, but they gave me office space to sit and work.
And you got it to Sundance before this, so congratulations on that.
Yes.
But I also want to talk more about how the film was made. You're from Oakland. The film is set in Oakland. The hero in this film is often torn between two worlds, right? Needing to sound white for the job, but act black, wanting to make money, but wanting to stay true to his friends and where he came from. How much of that resonates true with your life?
Well, I think that, you know, the sacrifices that we have to make in order to just survive is something that resonates with everyone. The film is not just about that, though. The trailer actually doesn't reveal most of what the film is about.
There are quite a few surprises in the film. We won't spoil it, but.
But I think that in my life, I'm always trying to figure out whether I'm doing the right thing or not. And I'm always constantly reassessing. So I think that's very much a part of me in there.
And then Noah, let's talk about the festival more broadly, because you have said that the festival wants to highlight Bay Area values, and among them diversity, innovation, social justice. One of the films is a documentary about Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I want to show a clip from that.
We welcome today Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
She's become such an icon.
Do you mind signing this copy?
I am 84 years old, and everyone wants to take a picture with me.
Notorious RBG. Yeah.
So why did you choose that film for the festival?
You know, we're here, we've been talking about this Bay Area icon, Boots Riley, but another icon for people here in San Francisco and the Bay Area is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's been this kind of light during this very dark political time we're going through right now. And this is one of those stand up and shout and cheer documentaries. It just makes you feel like it's all going to be better in the end. So I think at the Castro, when we actually play this film during the festival, during its theatrical release, it's going to be this real comfort for a lot of people. But I think also you're going to be seeing a lot of people standing up and cheering for this incredible woman. And
something new you're doing this year is hosting discussions around certain films. For example, The Cleaners, which is about who decides what we see online. Let's take a look at a clip from that as well.
Facebook has a bigger population than any state in the world. And so when it acts as censor, it is in some ways as powerful as a state.
Ignore. Ignore. Ignore.
If I didn't have social media, I wouldn't be able to get the word out. I probably wouldn't be standing here, right? I probably wouldn't be standing here right now.
Mark Zuckerberg is now the front page editor for every newspaper in the world, effectively.
So you're partnering with the Electronic Frontier Foundation for a discussion about this movie. What are you hoping to accomplish through that?
I think what we're trying to do here with SFFILM in general, because we have screenings throughout the rest of the year, we're supporting filmmakers, we engage in educational programs, is really to try to channel what we call Bay Area values into the work that we're doing. And one of the most important things we can do here in the Bay Area is actually talk about technology, its impact, and how it's actually changed our society. You know, without revealing any spoilers, one of the really key aspects of Sorry to Bother You is this extremely sophisticated critique of how the sort of venture capitalism and technology has actually really altered how we view morality. And I think what's been going on with Facebook over the last couple of weeks has also kind of really reinforced that we really need to pay attention to this. So The Cleaners is a film that actually talks about this kind of farm of people in the Philippines that actually scrubs the internet. And so it goes through and finds, you know, pornographic images or offensive speech, and you know, these people who live in a very, very different culture than what we have here in the United States, you know, are sort of subjected every day to the sort of worst of American capitalism in a way. What's great about the Electronic Frontier Foundation is that we have these incredibly interesting partners who can actually talk about the larger context around these technology concerns.
And very complex issues, yeah.
Very complex issues.
Privacy, how to protect it, how to balance that with freedom of speech.
It's huge. So we began working with them on the amazing documentary that won an Academy Award, Citizen 4 by Laura Poitras, about Edward Snowden. And we've actually been engaging them on a fairly regular basis to sort of come back as guests of ours, to actually, you know, continue to illuminate us here in the Bay Area and kind of allow us to be leaders in this kind of critique of what's going on in the technology industry.
Okay. And Boots, just real quickly, any more movies for you after this first film?
Yeah, I'm starting to write stuff now. So,
well, all right.
Yeah, this is just an expansion of everything I've already been doing.
We look forward to seeing your next work, and SF Film Festival running from April 4th to the 17th.
More of this vodka?
Thank you both. Whiskey is up next, but thank you for enjoying the vodka.
That's it. That's the whole
Boots
thing.
Riley and Noah Cowan. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll send some home with you after the interview. That will do it for us. You can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.
All right. That was great. Okay.